The Blue Line Voice, Blood, Sand, and Smoke. Maria Teresa, a United States Army sergeant, a war-decorated Iraq war veteran, and a woman whose story began long before the uniform. Before the Army, before the deployments, before Camp Liberty, Iraq, Maria Teresa had already survived battles most people never see. She survived sexual trauma before joining the military. She experienced homelessness before enlisting. And still, she stood back up. For 7 years, Maria Teresa served in the United States Army. She rose to the rank of sergeant. She deployed twice to Camp Liberty, Iraq. And she carried the weight of war, trauma, faith, and survival into a life that refused to be defined by pain. Today, Maria Teresa is the author of Fading Age, The Dusk of Innocence. She is an advocate, a speaker, a survivor, and a deeply spiritual woman who credits God with helping her navigate PTSD, trauma, and the long road back. Her story is not just about what happened to her. It is about what she did after it happened. It is about resilience, faith, combat, recovery, and the strength it takes to keep moving when life gives you every reason to quit. This is Maria Teresa, Army veteran, author, advocate, survivor. And her story deserves to be heard.
Hey, Maria, welcome to the Blue Line Voice, Blood, Sand, and Smoke. I've been looking forward to this conversation and having you on. And I want you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, where did you grow up, and let's get started.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here. I'm really excited. Well, to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm an Army combat veteran. I served 2 tours in Iraq, but originally I grew up in a little town 60 miles from the border called Marfa. A little bit about that town, it's actually quite famous. Marfa Mystery Lights, a lot of New York City artists have gone down there to do residency, and I'm a veteran, a college graduate, and now also a published author.
So you said you're a published author. You wrote a book, Fading Age, The Dusk of Innocence.
Yep, that's it.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about that book, what it's about, what inspired you to write that book?
Actually, it's an adaptation of the original. The original one was just Fading Age of Innocence, just like that. I wrote the original one when I was 16. I was a sophomore in high school, and it was inspired by a crush I had on a teacher. So I started writing originally when I was 13, but when I got to high school and I had that, I'm like, I'm pretty good at writing by now, so I think I'm going to take this idea and roll with it and see what happens. And a couple months later, Fading Age of Innocence was born, and it's about a teenage girl whose parents are both cops. One of them her mom gets killed in the line of duty in a sting operation gone wrong, and then her dad gets transferred from a small town to a big city, where I base it a little bit like me. She has a hard time adjusting, and then how she deals with challenges and obstacles where things aren't always what they seem, and this actually ends up biting her in the butt, for lack of better words, and it forces her to grow up quickly. But thankfully, with the support and love of her friend, of her dad and close friends, she's able to overcome that and finds her happily ever after in the end.
That's an intriguing book. I actually can't wait to read it. And
Okay.
where can, and just so people know, where can they find that book? Where can
It's
they?
on Amazon. It's
It's on.
in mm-hmm. It's on Amazon, ebook, paperback, and hardcover.
And what I will do is I will put that in the comments section, a link for your book and whatnot, so that guests can go and view it and purchase it on Amazon.
Yeah, I'm hoping hopefully sometime in the future I can do a book signing again, because I did one here locally at the American Legion. They hosted me, so it was fun.
Yeah. So a little bit more about you and where you grew up, the young Maria, and did your book that you wrote, did that your time growing up down in southern Texas, did that and have any type of inspiration of you writing that book?
No, not really. It was all just my imagination running wild. The only thing that's relevant is that I'm from a small town, she's from a small town, and she goes to a big city. I went to a big city eventually. And I did run into a situation where things weren't always what they seemed, and I trusted the wrong person, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah. You mentioned to me, we've talked prior to this podcast, but writing was a childhood dream for you. Is that
Yes,
correct?
absolutely.
And it's kind of like been that 30 years in the making, right?
Yeah, I've kept at it. I mean, I discovered my passion for writing when I was in seventh grade. It was my seventh grade English class. Shout out to Miss Polson in heaven. She gave us an assignment where we were supposed to write a short story, and this was supposed to be a compilation from all my classmates, and they were supposed to like put it like in a time capsule or something. I don't know if it ever happened, but later on to show future generations, hey, this is what the seventh grade class of whatever year it was, I don't even remember, wrote. And then from there, I'm like, I actually had fun writing it, so I'm like, well, let me see what else I can do. And from there, it went from that short story to poetry to just writing down random thoughts. And it wasn't until I was a sophomore in high school where I was inspired to write Fading Age.
And what are the biggest things that you think that inspire you to write?
Honestly, it's my frame of mind, because sometimes, usually, I've noticed that with a lot of like well known authors and stuff, they're usually not in their best frame of minds, and that's what inspires them. The same thing for musicians and stuff. Like, what was it? The Eagles, Hotel California. Case in
Mm-hmm.
point,
Yeah.
they got inspired when they weren't in the right frame of mind. I would like to think, kind of like for me, but that's how it goes.
Is that the truth about Hotel California?
Not 100% sure, but I think I've heard something about it somewhere.
Yeah.
It's fitting, because how would they come up with something as elaborate as that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hope they don't sue me or you, but
We'll be all right. As
just
long as
an
they don't
example,
play the song.
right? But yeah, I'm inspired by everything around me, things that happen, things I see, people I encounter. A lot of my characters in my books after this one have actually been inspired by people I know, and even the male lead in Fading Age
Mm,
is inspired by my teacher that I had a crush on.
that's funny. Growing up, was faith part of your life from the very beginning, or did it come about later in life?
My faith is actually the foundation of my life from the time I was born, really. Because and I have videos on social media too, TikTok primarily, where I talk about that, where I had the presence of God with me before I even knew what faith was. And then from the time I was able to understand and I was able to learn to talk and walk, faith was always instilled in me. One of my earliest memories of it is I was like 3 or 4. My aunt would stand in front of her altar every morning. She was Catholic, so was I, and say her prayers and say her rosary. And then from there, it became like breathing, like natural instinct. I wake up in the morning, I say my prayers, I brush my teeth, I have my breakfast.
Yeah. So that your faith is very grounded into you.
Very.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't because of it.
So this is going to integrate, your faith and the hard years before the army, and before you put on the uniform. You already had life experience, right? You'd
Oh, yeah.
already experienced life, and when you look back at the young woman you were, um, what do you want the listeners to understand about you from that era?
Well, my time before the military, I was already encountering the trifecta of things that can go wrong for a person. By the time I was 24, I had experienced sexual assault, domestic violence, and homelessness. So I want people to understand, at least about me, that I'm still here, I'm still strong, and I didn't let what happened define me in a negative way. Instead of instead of being the victim, I chose to be the victor and rise above those challenges. And it actually ended up helping me succeed in the army because by the time I got to basic training, with everything I'd been through, the drill sergeants getting in my face and yelling at me were like kittens.
Yeah, so and you're speaking publicly about this,
I am.
and I'm giving you, I want to give you that safe space to talk and and elaborate, a little bit more if you feel comfortable. That part of your life, whatever feels right to you, and you can go as far as you want or as little as you want.
Thank you. For that part of my life, if there's people, women, men out there suffering what I went through and you've been a victim, I just want them to know because I've been there that you don't have to be ashamed about what happened and it's not your fault. And the best thing you can do for yourself from the giddy up, from the moment it happens, is to speak up, to ask for help. Because honestly, when I went through my stuff, both times, another one later, but later, I turned to my faith primarily, first and foremost. And then my faith was what gave me the strength and fortitude I needed to ask for help. Because I know, even though we've come a long way with society accepting victims of sexual assault and sexual trauma, we're still a long ways from where we should be. And a lot of times, point blank, honestly, the victim still gets blamed. And that's another thing I want people to understand, that even though you're, and I'm not trying to discourage anybody from speaking up. If anything, I would encourage them and encourage them. But also, I want to be truthful with them and for them to know that not everybody's going to be very accepting. You will get looked down on, you will get judged. And I think when you're in part of the healing process, you need to know that you can't take that personal. Although it's hard to do, especially when it comes to reporting things like that to the authorities. They pretty much already, at least with my case, it felt like they had already made up their mind about who the guilty one was and who wasn't.
When I look back at my time in law enforcement, there's a lot of female victims that don't even go to the authorities. Would that be reasonable to say?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, statistics will show you that most of the time there's more cases that happen that don't get reported than those that do because of that. Because victims don't want to be re-victimized because they already have an understanding. It's a shameful thing that happened. You feel very vulnerable and dirty at the same time. And that's not something a lot of victims want to say, hey, here I am, this is what happened. It's something that, and then depending on the level of trauma and how it happened, can make it worse. Because, like in what happened to me in my personal life and what happened in the story, is the perpetrator will often say, nobody's going to believe you. And sometimes, I think majority of the time, I would like to think is why victims are afraid to speak up, because maybe they've done some questionable things that that'll, how do I say it, that can make them look guilty, like they caused it or it was their fault. Like, nowadays with the invention of the computer and OnlyFans and stuff like that, where people are allowed to be more risque, things like that. It'll be like, oh, well, if you were the victim, why were you wearing this? Why were you doing this? Why were you doing that? And that's irrelevant. When it comes to incidents of sexual trauma and sexual crimes, it's a matter of control. They want to be in control of something, and it just so happened that unfortunately, like with me, I found myself in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I paid the piper. And I'm not blaming myself, and I don't feel guilty about it anymore. But I think if I had a crystal ball and I could go back in time and do things differently, I would have probably made different choices that could have minimized the chance even more of that happening.
That's hopefully people listen to what you say, because there are so many victims of sexual assault out there, and unfortunately there's also males of victims of sexual assault too.
Yeah,
And it seems like it's a stigma. Nobody's going to listen to me, or I'm embarrassed,
yep. I'm
and
ashamed.
I'm ashamed of myself. I feel dirty, whatever the case may be. But you know, if you don't say nothing, these people that take advantage and do these types of things
They
to
win.
their victims, they will continue,
Exactly.
and they're not going to stop, and they will get away with it until somebody says something.
Exactly.
So I appreciate you sharing that portion of your life with us.
No
I know it's
problem.
hard to talk about, but and this is really, you had some difficult times before joining the army, because there was a portion of your life during that time that you were homeless. Am I correct?
Yes, I was. My son's father was in the Navy. When he got out, we moved in with his parents in California. And we'll just say we're from two different opposing religious beliefs. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like mixing oil and water. It's not going to happen no matter what. And I immediately found myself up against a brick wall and a friction, because that's where the domestic violence came in. Normally, in the American side, and the way we're brought up here in the West, you treat your wife with respect, you honor her, and in that other one, they don't. If anything, they view their women, their wives, a lot of as property, especially if they're not of the same cultural religious background. And that's kind of why I fell into that, why I ended up homeless basically. Back when I met my
You
son's father, I was like, oh, I'm in love, doves and hearts and rainbows. And when reality set in, I'm like, whoa, this isn't exactly what I imagined it was gonna be. But I don't regret a bit of it, because one, I got my son out of it. Praise be God. And the homelessness taught me that I can be independent. And I got the fortitude to make it on my own if I had to, which is what I had to do. It also taught me to be resourceful, because I had to, for myself, look for those resources, seek them out, know what resources were available, and how to go about getting that help, which is what led me to join the military, because I was homeless and the army was going to give me everything that I didn't have at the time. I didn't have a roof over my head. I didn't have a steady job. I was lucky I was in a shelter and I knew I was going to at least eat and have a warm bed to sleep in. But for a lot of people, it's not like that. And even though I was homeless, I consider myself very blessed, because I know it could have been a whole lot worse and I could have been in a lot of danger, especially in California.
That's another thing that goes underreported, or not spoken about much because of embarrassment or guilt or whatever, is victims of domestic violence, right?
Mhm.
And having to navigate that system. I know every state's a little bit different as far as what they have out there for resources,
Yeah.
and times have changed and things have come along greatly.
Yeah.
But there is help out there. It's just and and getting those resources and getting out of that situation that you're in is it, it's critical.
It
and
is.
and you knew you had to make you knew in yourself, you knew you had to make that move. Am I correct?
Yep. Exactly. And another thing I want to let people out there know is when people think of domestic violence, they think of physical abuse, punches and bruises and black eyes. It's not necessarily always like that. It can be verbal, mental, and emotional as well. When
Absolutely.
your significant other, keeps you isolated, takes your cell phone, and won't let you talk to your family, or when his family tells you, oh, you don't pay the bill, you can't be making long distance calls, that's abuse. And that's what I had to go through.
Yeah.
And by the time I got ready to leave, it's actually weird the way it happened, but this is where my faith and my turning to Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, literally saved me. Because when I say God works in mysterious ways, this is a prime example. When I did finally get my cell phone back, you know how sometimes recycled numbers you get prank calls or wrong number calls or whatever? Well, this happened to me. In the middle of the night, this random stranger calls, and I don't know what possessed me to spill my guts to this complete stranger. Because by this point, my son's grandparents were adamant that because I had called the cops, it was shameful to them and their beliefs. Therefore, I had to leave. I was no longer welcome. I had to leave my son there, and I was going to go back to Texas on a bus that my aunt and uncle were supposed to pay for. At least that's what they were wanting. However, when I got this phone call and I explained the situation to this dude, he was like, no. He's like, whatever you do, do not leave your son behind. Because if you do, they're likely to claim abandonment and you'll never see him again. So whatever you do, don't leave your son. And I got to thinking, well, you know what? Shoot, he has a point. Because considering all the friction already with that family, I wouldn't have put it past them. So rather than be safe than sorry, I was like, well, he has a point. But I'm thinking, well, who do I call? Where do I go? And then, light bulb, I was thinking about my son. Well, he's seen a lot of the arguments between his dad and me. He's seen how his grandparents were treating me and ostracizing me, and even though he was only 3 at the time, kids sense things. They're not dumb. They pick up on things. I'm like, well, I don't want that for my son. So I called CPS, and then they told me where to go next, and then they gave me instructions to get away from the house, take what I needed, and my son, get away where I'm safe, and then call the cops, tell them what happened, what I did, and they'll take me somewhere. Which is what ended up happening. Sure enough, as soon as the sun came up, it was daybreak, and I was already safe. They had called the cops, but the cops told them she's safe. She didn't kidnap him. You're good.
Yeah.
And then from
So
there,
go ahead.
it was like that's when I was like, you know what? I did this for my son because I don't want him to grow up in that. I don't want him to grow up seeing his mother getting mistreated. And then when I got to the shelter, just before I joined the military, I was like, well, you know what? It's one thing for me to be on the street, but I couldn't do that to my son. So
So you there was a transition. You have your son and you're homeless, and you knew you had to make a move. You had to make a transition. Am I correct?
I
And
did. Yes.
and and you walked into a recruiter's office. Am I correct?
Sort of. Actually, I walked into a job
Go,
fair.
yeah, go ahead and tell us about it.
Okay. The funniest thing, it was at an arena downtown. I walk in, I see the army recruiter at the far end of the thing, and I'm thinking to myself, God, the army? Are you serious? Are you kidding me right now? So I was like, I remember telling myself, you know what, God, I'll sleep on it. So I went and I talked to the recruiter. I got my information. They gave me all the typical see the world, college paid for, and all this other stuff. So that night, when I went to sleep, when I said I'll sleep on it, God literally answered me because I had a dream where I heard the voice of, I could have sworn it could be an angel, when she told me now is time. And then after that, I don't know if you guys or the public in general is familiar with the song God Bless the Broken Road" by Rascal Flatts. If you haven't heard it, I encourage you to go give it a listen, look it up, because that's what spoke to me. When I heard that song in my dream, I felt like God was speaking directly to me. Like, I know you're lost, I know where you're at, but don't worry, I'm gonna guide you. Like the theme of the song, and sure enough, as soon as I woke up the next morning, first thing I did, I went and I bought that CD with my little allowance I was allowed to have, and then I went to the recruiter's office and I said, "Sign me up." He looked at me, he's like, "You sure?" I'm like, "Absolutely." So that was one part, and then the next part where I saw God acting in my life, showing His grace and mercy to me, was I had always wanted an office job growing up. It was like one of those lucrative things that only popular people in town got. Like working at the courthouse or stuff like that. I'm like that would be cool. I would be happy with an office job. A bonus, not necessary, but I'd be happy with about 5 grand. And wouldn't you know, by the grace and mercy of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, that's exactly what I got. I got 42 Alpha Human Resources Specialist and a 5 grand bonus on the dot. So I dare anybody to tell me God doesn't answer prayers to answer me that. I had
It's
nothing.
pretty moving.
I was on the street. I had been verbally, mentally, and emotionally abused. But at the same time, looking back now, I remember that just before I left my son's father's house, he told me that I should convert and switch to this other belief system. And I remember looking at him straight in the face, and I told him I would rather live in a cardboard box on the street than turn my back on the only God I've ever known. And then fast forward to about 5 years ago or so, 20 years after I left, when I said that, I owned my own home in my name. 4 bedroom, 2 bath, tax free. God sometimes takes a while. But you know what? When they say He gives you more than you could have ever imagined, that's what He's done for me.
Yeah.
Where in the world, being from an itty bitty little scrawny small town, was I gonna imagine that me, who got made fun of the whole time, who was never expected to amount to anything, would get to serve her country honorably for 7 years, get to see the world, get to meet famous A-list celebrities, including one of the presidents, get college paid for in full, no student loans, graduate with honors from college with a bachelor's degree, get picked out of 800 people to be in the National Society of Leadership and Success, NSLS, which is like National Society at the college level, and then have a GPA high enough to get accepted into a top 15 law school. Granted, I only went for my master's degree in legal studies that I can't do anything with because I don't have a paralegal certificate, but that's beside the point. It's like everything that I have ever prayed for, God has seen me through it. And then some. When I was wanting to graduate with honors from college or in high school, I didn't know NSLS existed till I got a letter in the mail saying, "Oh, yeah, you have a 3.85 GPA. Come on, sign up."
So going back, so you sign up with the army, and I'm sure it wasn't too long after that you're on your way. Walk
Yep.
us into basic Walk us into basic training.
That was actually quite funny because when I got there in life, I'm 4'10", 100 pounds soaking wet. At least I was back then. Uh, Drill sergeants thought it was kind of cute, and I looked helpless and defenseless, and they had no problem getting up in my face like typical drill sergeants do to soldiers coming in. Well, they learned real quick I wasn't one of them. I remember standing on the line, telling a drill sergeant as loud as I could that I might be slow and I might be last, but I wasn't going home. And from what I can remember, they didn't mess with me too much after that.
What do you think the hardest part for basic training for you
For
was?
me, it was actually a lot of the obstacle courses because they're not short people friendly. Like some of the leaps and jumps you have to make from one post to the other
Yeah.
one, and I didn't like heights at the time, so I struggled with that. But I thought it was pretty cool that I got to rappel down a 40-foot tower and not be scared.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah! I felt like an action, like a star in an action movie in my mind.
And what during basic training was there a point? What was the army doing back then? 10 weeks.
I think so.
Yeah. Was there a point during that time frame where you said, "I'm going to make this"?
The minute I got there, because I knew I had nothing else. Quitting when I got there was not going to be an option, no matter what I had to do, how many prayers I had to pray, or how many tears I had to cry. I was not going home because
And you
I also felt that if
go ahead.
God had brought me up to that point, it was because He was going to help me get through it.
So you do your basic training, and then you have to go into the Army's AIT,
Mm-hmm.
which you were a 42 Alpha for as a human resource specialist. So where was your AIT at?
Basic and AIT for me were both at Fort Jackson.
Okay, so you stayed in the same place.
Yep. I just went from one side of
And
the base to the other.
when I was down at Leonardwood, even though I was in the Air Force, my schooling was with the Army and other branches, but the Army's AIT was very similar back then to when they came out of basic training, went in the AIT. AIT was still a little similar to basic training. Am I correct?
A little bit, and the structure wise, we still had drill sergeants. We still had to march from here to there and there to here. We did have other branches alongside us, but they were in a separate building.
Yeah. And so you you're in doing your time in the Army, and I think everybody's goal in the military is to do better and improve on themselves, and doing that comes responsibilities and making rank. And you made the rank of sergeant
I
in the
did.
Army.
I did.
And what did that, when I know what it meant for me when I became an NCO, but what did it mean for you when you crossed that line?
Wow. That I remember. Well, it was 3 years of hard work and studying my behind off. But
Hmm.
when the list came out and I saw that my name was on it, I remember hitting the ground on my knees, praising God,
Hmm.
because there were times, myself included, when making the rank of sergeant at the time felt like trying to get to the moon. But I told myself, you know what? I got Jesus beside me. I I'm pretty good at memorizing stuff. I know the requirements and the customs and courtesies, all that stuff that you need to learn to get promoted. I was confident in that, and after that, it was just a matter of the points dropping for me to get picked up. Because I believe at the time the points were, I think it's a different system now altogether, but back then it was like 690 something. I had like, they dropped down to six, I think it was 630 something. but they dropped significantly to where I was time and grade, time and service on point to get picked up for sergeant.
And so you become sergeant. Now you've transitioned from into a NCO position, and that comes with leadership. And people that don't know, NCO stands for non-commissioned officer in the enlisted ranks. So now you have responsibilities more so than you had prior. What kind of leader did you want to be for those who were under you?
I wanted to be a leader that they could come to without fear.
Mm-hmm.
I had, when I first became a sergeant, I think I had two, maybe three soldiers in their initial counseling. I told them, I'm going to be firm, I'm going to be fair, but I'll never lie to you. And I'll never ask you to do anything I wouldn't be willing to do myself.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, based on things I had been through and experienced in the military, which in and of itself is going to be a whole nother separate set of books that I'll talk about at that time, it also showed me what kind of a leader I didn't want to be. And I knew that I didn't want to be a leader that would belittle or look down on their soldiers or try to or set them up for failure instead of success. I didn't want to be that kind of leader. I wanted to lead from the front with integrity and following the rules and regulations set forth by the Army to the T.
That's awesome. And so you're you and me are actually both the same age. So during our time in the military, we had two wars running simultaneously. We had Iraq, we had Afghanistan, and you deployed to Iraq, and you went twice. Am I correct?
Yep, I went twice, and I don't know if it was the grace of God again or something, but I was blessed to be able to go to the same base twice. I was at Camp Liberty. It doesn't exist anymore, but I both times I deployed, I was at Camp Liberty.
Camp Liberty, I believe, is that just south of Baghdad?
It's right on the outskirts. It's near. It's connected to BIOP, Baghdad International
Mm-hmm.
Airport. That's where we landed into, and then the base was like not even 10 minutes away.
Okay, okay. And what do you? And this is a spot where I want you to feel comfortable. But what did you? What do you remember of Camp Liberty? And both times, I mean, the look, the
The,
I know for me, like the the smells, the sounds, and whatnot. What was that experience like for you?
it was kind of weird at first. It literally, because it is a third world country, it felt like going into a third world country. It was very dusty, very hot, and it smelled like sewer everywhere. And there were concrete blast walls everywhere because back then, it was the beginning of Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and they didn't like us a whole lot over there at the time. So they would do their darnest to try to get rid of us, and that's why we were surrounded by blast walls. It was like you go anywhere, everything is a blast wall around it. But as for my
Yeah.
experiences, oh, go ahead.
No, I had to keep going. I'm sorry.
No,
There
you're
was a
fine.
lag. That's all right. Keep going.
As for my experiences, I had both good and bad. The bad experience that I had was, of course, the threat of incoming fire. A couple of times I got really close. One time I remember I was heading to the post office because my first tour I was postal clerk. So I hear what sounds like the sound of a jet, like, and I'm like, oh crap, that doesn't sound good. So I had like a split second to scan my surroundings, and the closest thing that I saw next to a blast wall was a pallet of water bottles. I'm like, okay, great. If this thing blows off, I'm gonna be dead and wet. But as soon as I crouched down and I remember closing my eyes tight, saying, God, please don't let me die. God, please don't let me die. Then I opened my eyes, I look out the corner of my eye and I see a shadow, the shadow of a rocket, fly directly over the top of my head. And then I remember the ground shaking and terrible, and it shook and when it exploded. And then I'm thinking, okay, cool, I'm good. It's only one. I keep going, and then all of a sudden, boom, another one, and this one's even harder. I was actually like less than a football field away in front of it. When it hit,
Yeah.
it went through a. I was fortunate that there was a concrete blast wall between me and it, because it got. When I was near to death, that was about as close as I've been.
I think that I can relate to what your stories or what you're saying because I experienced them. And the when you're on a base, you have to deal with the during that time and in the theater of war, what you have to deal with is it's the unknown, right? You don't
Yep.
know when the insurgent's gonna, you know, make that decision to fire those rockets off and
Yeah.
direct them towards the base. And and they didn't have great accuracy all the time, so it's not like
Yeah.
there was no prediction of where it's going to land. And I don't
Mm-mm.
know if your base, I don't know if Liberty was the same as where I was, but normally the air raid siren went
Yep.
off after the explosion, right?
No, we got pretty lucky. Ours worked pretty good. Like within moments of hearing the incoming, incoming, we'd hear the.
Really? You're,
Yep.
mm,
I think it could have been probably because Camp Liberty was also one of the major bases, and they had to know ahead of time before the
mm,
insurgents were coming. But let me tell you what, them guys were sneaky. They would get on post too. I remember one time they parked a. It looked weird. Like I was working at the post office, and then all of a sudden one day, a car that doesn't belong there, packed with stuff, appears. I'm like, that doesn't look right. And then I think I think it was a little bit later after that when we had another incident. It was around, I think it was the day after 4th of July when a round struck near our dining facility. And there was a lot of commotion because they had seen some of the locals filming. So, another thing that I experienced, this was my second tour, and I'm sure here in the States, almost everybody heard about it when they had the shooting at the combat stress clinic. Uh, One of those killed was my therapist. And I remember the experience because leading up to this thing happening, my unit had sent me there because for a time I shut down completely. I wasn't talking to nobody. I would just keep my head down, mind my business, go to my job, do my job, go home for weeks. And then finally they're like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I don't want to be here no more, but I'm deployed. I can't go home, so I'm dealing with it the only way I know how, which is shutting down." And they're like, "No, no, no. We're going to send you, for a week. You won't have to deal with the office or anything. It's like a little mini vacation on post." All I do was go to classes and learn stuff and all this other thing. So then when I was there, I remember because it was shaped like a kind of like a box, but like a C, like you take out the middle and it's open. I remember coming up to the doorway that would go into the waiting room, and for some reason, I didn't know it at the time, but I would get this god awful, dreadful fear that I couldn't explain, like in the bottom of my heart, like I sensed something was coming. I didn't know what, but I sensed it. So I would look in there, and then I would, like in my mind's eye, I was like, no, no, this can't be, no. And then I'd run across it real quick, thinking, oh no, they're gonna get me. So I would run across, and then every time I would come by there, like in front of it, every time I would cross in front of it, I'm like, oh Lord, I don't know what's coming. I don't know what's gonna happen. So then a few weeks later, no, I think it was a few days, actually about a week later, it happened. And I remember the day before, I was walking by the building and I got that god awful feeling again. Like something bad's gonna happen. Like, I was like, and I remember, praying to God, because over there, God's all you got. You need God over there more than you need your battle buddies, because over there, when you're praying, you're not praying just to make it to the next day. You're praying to be able to make it home in one piece. And those are 9-month deployments. So it's like you're praying for the jackpot of jackpots.
Yeah.
So I was walking by and then I got this feeling, and I remember stopping and praying. I was like, Lord, if it would be your will, whatever's going to happen, don't let me be there when it does. And please protect all the intake workers, all the people that I had gotten close to, because I was there for 5 days straight. I got to know them. And then after the dust settled and, reports come out and stuff, they're like, yeah, this dude, he went in there. And the way the news described it, he was aiming at people. Well, when I got to talking to the intake workers after the funeral, they told me, they're like, you know what, Maria, the weirdest thing just happened. I'm like, what's that? They're like, when he was aiming in our direction, it looked like he didn't see us. We were right there. We saw him like eye to eye, and he didn't see them.
Mm.
And I was
Well,
like, oh my gosh. I was like, thank you,
so
God.
faith was a big part of deployment. You already mentioned that, and did your relationship with God change
Yes,
when you were? Yeah.
I would say it magnified, because, you know, at the time, both times, I didn't have the best relationship with my chain of command or my battle buddies. So, like always, whenever I've been just me, I always turn to God and I'm like, God, it's you and me. We got this. I know you got my back. I know you got my back. And that's how I was able to make it through both deployments. But not everything was doom and gloom. There were some exciting things, like over there, because we are so far removed. The USO often does tours with celebrities and singers and stuff. So, one of the fun things that I got to experience there was, I got to meet, I think, two of my favorite singers, country music. And also, this person was doing a humanitarian aid mission with NATO. She stopped by and wanted to say hi to us. The only thing I'll say about her is that she's really famous. She's been in a lot of movies, and she is not stuck up at all in person, not even a little bit. My favorite movie by her is Tomb Raider, so that'll tell you who it is. But she was a sweetheart, and I felt so humbled to meet her. And I remember too, I'll tell you a funny story about how God shut me up, because he can do that too. So I remember I was thinking, oh, really, God? So I have to be a wounded warrior at Walter Reed to be able to meet this person? Is that how it is? 2x4 moment in the head by Jesus. Hypothetical.
Right.
She comes to our base, and it's like I could see God telling me, okay, now what are you going to complain about, huh?
Mm-hmm. I brought her
And,
to you.
yep. And, and then another cool thing that I got to do was meet the sitting president at the time. It was like crazy. It was like going into an airport and you could see those guys
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. But we're military. Come on now. They're easy to spot for us. And I remember I was like, dude, you stand out, you stick out like a sore thumb, right? Just saying. But I thought it was really cool that me, little bitty old me from a bit like pipsqueak small town, again, getting to do something that is, wow. Nobody in my hometown would ever get a chance like that. Or seldomly, I should say. So I'm over here thinking, yep, for not being the name most likely to succeed, I've sure succeeded in a lot of areas. And I've gotten to do some pretty cool things and meet some really awesome people.
That's awesome.
So that was the highlight of my trip, my deployment, I should say, not trip.
When a lot of veterans that are in theater, we come home and it's like a culture shock, right? But when you came home, what was the hardest part about when you came home?
The hardest part for me was readjusting to civilian life, because over there it's like you have you you hear things, you experience things that here in the States don't happen, and when you hear they startle you and you jump. Like, for example, whenever I remember I was out eating with my aunt and my uncle at a restaurant, and then the refrigerator door would slam shut, and I remember jumping. And then when it shut again, I ducked under the table, and my aunt and my uncle looked at me like, "What's wrong with you?" And then I had to explain to them that's what it sounds like when an incoming round hits. So subconsciously, my mind is wired for a rat.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I had to slowly, what is it? What would be the word? To overcome. A challenge to overcome is unwiring my brain from a rack and wiring it for back in the States.
Yeah, you don't unwire just like that.
No. Mm-mm.
So
And for a lot of
when you
people, it takes a long time. Sorry.
it does, it sticks with a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't. I don't say it. You're always going to remember it.
Yeah.
It's not going to go away. But you know, PTSD is a word that's thrown around,
Oh yeah.
but but very few people understand what it's like to actually live with it. How would you describe it? I mean, I've heard this. People say this is people that would never, and and I don't want to upset anybody by saying this, but first responder community, veterans community, nurses, we're we see a lot of bad stuff, and I've heard the word PTSD thrown around outside those communities, but what for people that don't carry it or don't have it, how would you describe it to people that don't have it or think they have it?
Well, for me, because I still suffer with it now,
Mm-hmm.
because not only do I have the trauma of before I joined the military, but also the things I experienced in depth within the army while serving my country. It doesn't go away. For those who think, oh, it's not like turning off a switch. And it's not a label. It's not something to aspire to have or to, like in current times, people, I have PTSD, and like, and they're 16. I'm like, mm-mm. I'm like,
Hmm.
you don't know what real PTSD is. PTSD is waking up in the middle of the night for no reason. It's seeing something or smelling something that reminds you of that traumatic event, and you flip out. Like, sometimes for me, I have to have like a fidget spinner or something, or I start tapping on my chest, and I have to talk myself down out of it to bring myself to reality that, hey, no, snap out of it. That's not happening anymore. You're cool. You're safe. And it's something that PTSD is also something that can strike at any moment. It's like a panic attack. I can be in the middle of traffic or sitting here talking to you. It's hard to predict when I'm going to have a panic attack related to PTSD. So it's not something that I'm proud that I have. It's not something that should be glorified, because it also comes with the price of serving our country, because sometimes that's a scar that we have to carry for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. And for you, right? So you had trauma prior to the service, and then during the service,
Yep.
and how do you? Is there any separation in that whatsoever?
Not really. I would say it's just an exacerbation of the former. It's the same kind of trauma, but in a different way, based on the circumstances and the nature of the beast, so to speak. The same traumas that happen on the outside happen on the inside. And it's just the military is its own separate community, but the same rules apply. I mean, the same thing. It's just, and that's something also that I plan to disclose in more detail at a later time. But for those that think, oh no, it's no big deal, you just serve your country, no. Some of us have scars outside of combat that affect us for the rest of our lives.
Hmm.
And when you have leadership that doesn't care, it's different than having a boss in the civilian side. In the military, it's different because they take on more of a role model kind of a role, not just you clock in at 8, leave at 5, that's the end of it. No. And when you have people like that turn on you or that don't have your back like they should, it makes the trauma that was already there magnified. Because you're not only having to deal with the before, you're having to deal with the right now. And when you're in the right now in the military, you have very little options because you're governed by the Uniform Code of Military Justice. You can't just say, screw this, I quit. It doesn't work that way. You still have to finish out your contract in spite of who your leadership might be, in spite of what you might be going through, in spite of whatever trauma you're experiencing. It's like you're the military 24/7. And it's a very tightrope, I should say, to navigate.
It is. It is. Does Let me ask you a question. Does reading the Bible help you?
Most definitely. In
Does it help
fact,
you with those from those moments throughout life? Do you find certain scripture readings and whatnot that relate to your situations?
absolutely. In fact, one of my favorite scriptures that I also have tattooed on my back is Jeremiah 29:11. For those that aren't familiar with it, it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope in a future." And for me, that was what I lived by because I I had to remind myself constantly that yes, I know I have God with me, but in spite of everything I'm going through, I know there's going to be something good that comes out of it. And I told myself something good is going to come out of it because one day I'm going to share my story. It's going to reach the right person and it's going to help them not to feel like I felt. Back when I was going through both of my traumas, in and out, God was all I had. In the army, in Iraq, in combat, before, after, now, He's my best friend. And I know that I can turn to Him, and I know that He didn't bring me this far for it to just end. That's it. You know, there's gonna be more, I feel, that is gonna, that's gonna turn into positive. Even the another scripture is trust in me with all your heart and soul and lean not upon your own understanding and I will direct your path. That's another script. I don't remember the title of it, but that's another one that has helped me. And, and another one, cast your cares upon the Lord and I will give you all these things. Like whatever you pray for, trust in God. Like sometimes it's hard because we want to see it here, we want to see it now. It's like I want water, here it is. When it comes to prayer and God answering, it doesn't always work that way. And sometimes when it comes to God, it's not necessarily that he's saying, no, I'm not going to answer your prayer. But for me, it was more like, it's not time yet. You're not at the right point in your life where you can handle having X, Y, and Z. And I'll give you a perfect example too. When I met my happily ever after, my husband, if I would have met him 10, 20 years ago, 10, yeah, 10, 20 years ago, I wasn't in the right frame of mind. I had a different agenda, and I feel if God would have blessed me with this amazing man that's my best friend, my battle buddy, and my husband, back then, I would have ruined it. But now, after everything I've been through, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, it helps me to appreciate and value the treasure I have. And God's not going to give us something harmful or anything unless it's going to bring out the best in us or make us better. Now, on that note, we also have free will. So we have the choice of taking those experiences and letting it make us bitter, like, this is all God's fault. God doesn't exist. Yeah, right. He's not answering my prayers. Or we can say, you know what? It sucks that I'm going through this. It's very painful, but you know what? I'm going to trust in the Lord my God no matter what. I don't care who says what does what. I'm going to put my faith and trust in Jesus because something good is going to come out of this.
So
And that,
that would correlate into the, there's so many people that will listen to this, and who feel like God God doesn't listen to them. He doesn't hear me, and which I don't believe is true. But what do you say to those people when they say, and I'm sure you've heard it from friends or whatnot, or other
yeah,
people in walks of life, that he doesn't listen to me? What do you say to those people?
I say to them, be patient because whatever you're praying for is on God's time, not yours. And He's not going to give you something that's going to corrupt you. And He's not going to put you in a position that you're not going to recover from. And, you know, trust in God with all your heart and soul and lean not upon your own understanding, and He will direct your path. That's what you have to do. Lead by faith and not by sight. Don't trust what you can see, I would tell them. Trust what the Bible says. Because it was written, by prophets and stuff, but also by God. He condoned it, He ordained it. So if you're going to believe anything anybody says, start with that book.
Has God ever felt silent to you?
Yes. Because
And
I'm the type of
what did
person
you do?
that I'm the type of person that when I ask for, I pray a prayer, it's like I'm expecting instant gratification. And when God doesn't give me what I want when I want it, I see it as God being silent. But one thing I've always come to realize is the teacher's always silent during the test. So every obstacle that I've encountered, I've seen it as a test. Do I have what it takes or do I not have what it takes to pass this test? Like when you make it through basic training. Like, are you physically fit enough to make it or are you just going to give up? That's the same thing with prayer. It's something that you got to be consistent with and you got to practice and rehearse. Because the more you rehearse your prayer, the more you seek out a relationship with God, the more you're going to develop one. And we all have free will. I choose to follow God, other people choose to follow other things. I'm not telling them what to do, I'm telling them what's worked for me, and I encourage them to at least give it a try. Like I tell my customers where I work now, what have you got to lose? Just try it. I mean, you're already down in the dumps at the bottom. The only place you can go now is up.
Right?
Give it a
Exactly.
try. I mean, you got nothing to lose. If you've already lost everything else, just put your trust in something that you know is going to produce a dividend. Granted, it might take a while. It might not happen on your terms or in the way you want, but it's going to happen because the reason I'm telling my story is because I've lived it.
Yeah.
When I was born, I was premature. I had fluid in my brain. I weighed 2 pounds. Praise be God. 40 something years later, here I am telling you guys about it. Because if he did it for me, I know he's going to do it for you guys. You just have to believe and have faith. I mean, I can't drive that home any more than trust. If you don't believe me, I have a I encourage you guys to follow me on social media. I have a video on TikTok where I show you guys my scars. If God hadn't been there and he hadn't guided the doctors, given them the wisdom and guided their hands through every delicate procedure, I probably wouldn't be here right now. But I am.
It's amazing, amazing everything you've explained. And going back, you were at 3 days old. You rolled over on yourself by yourself.
Yep,
Am I correct?
yep.
Yeah.
That's what mom always told me. Every time I got down on myself, she's like, you're a miracle baby. You can't just give up. She's like, you're here for a reason. Not to compare, I'm not comparing myself to Jesus, but he rose from the dead after 3 days. I wasn't supposed to make it. I rolled over after 3 days. That was God saying, I'm not done with you yet. When you're down in the dumps, you're feeling down, you feel like this is it, no mas, and you wake up the next morning, that's God telling you, I'm not done with you yet. There's more for your life. You just got to trust.
Yeah. So now that we've heard the story, which for the audience, like Maria and I did talk obviously before this, but and I've heard a lot of this, and it's courageous for her to come on here and share her story. And but let's go back to the book because I'm really interested in it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and you know the title. Why'd you pick it?
Well, I picked Fading Age of Innocence, because it follows the theme of the story. Young adult woman coming of age, her innocence fades as she experiences things in life. Now, the remake of it, Fading Age, The Dusk of Innocence, which is the post 2020 version to make it up, to be in tune with the times. Fading Age, The Dusk of Innocence also continues to follow the theme of the story because she's at the dusk of her innocence. And it's like getting ready to end one chapter to begin another one. I still haven't decided if there's going to be a sequel, but right now where it stands, the title of the book basically lets my readers know that she's coming to the end of a chapter, the end of her innocence.
I know for me personally, like writing is very therapeutic. There's something about it. I don't know what it is. It feels nice and it's common.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Yeah, the same. For me, writing is very therapeutic. Like, sometimes, when you're listening to a song and it hits you just right, and then you have that stroke of inspiration, that's kind of how writing is for me. That's how, when you mention it being therapeutic, that's how it's therapeutic, because it helps you dig up things that are buried that need to come out. And sometimes certain things just trigger it. Sometimes, like, listening to that one song, or you're sitting somewhere and then you look up at the clouds and an idea strikes, and then that leads you down a rabbit hole. And that's kind of how writing is for me. And I never know where my writing's going to lead, because it starts with an idea that I write down. Sometimes it becomes nothing, sometimes it turns into Fading Age, Dusk of Innocence.
When when you were writing the book, were there any chapters that that kind of like broke you, like
Oh, yeah,
that hit
abs-
you?
most definitely. There's a couple of scenes in Fading Age where my character is experiencing her trauma, very similar to what I went through. And as I was writing it, I was literally in tears, and it got to the point where I literally had to take a break from my computer mid sentence and walk away, because it affected me that much. It brought back so vivid of a memory that I needed to get away and go process it before coming back.
So not only did you have chapters that broke you, but did you have any chapters that healed you?
Yes. Yes, I think one of the chapters that healed me was towards the end of the book, where she finds her happily ever after, and it serves to give my readers hope that, look, you're going through some god awful stuff, but they say all good things never last, neither do the bad ones. And sometimes it's just one of those things where it's like a cold. You need to let it run its course. And after it runs its course, you feel better. Same thing with trauma, same thing with a panic attack, same thing with my book, with writing my book. It's it's comforting to know that there was a happy ending at the end.
When a person reads your book, what do you what do you hope they take from it?
What I want my readers to take from my book is not necessarily so much a life lesson, but with the way the book is written, I want them to feel everything my character feels. I want them to feel the butterflies in their stomach when she finds her first love, and I want them to feel the anguish and the angst of a father who feels like a failure because he feels he didn't do enough to protect his daughter. And I want them to celebrate with her when she graduates, because she's in high school. She's going to graduate. Not giving away anything secret, but I want them to feel that roller coaster of emotions, and I want them to see what my character sees. And what how I like to describe my writing, it's going to sound corny, but it's like the adult version of playing with Barbies. I create my characters and dress them up and make them do whatever. It's kind of like the same version, only on paper.
Do you so since this book, do you have any I I think I already know the answer to this question, but do, do you have another book in mind? Any other write-ins?
Yes, I have several books planned. There's some that are already finished. I'm looking at publishing my next book, which is going to be called The Righteous Warrior. It's about an ex Army intelligence analyst hired by the Pentagon to be a spy, to watch for possible sleeper cells online. And
Mm.
then she falls in love with the enemy, and then that unleashes a scandal that the powers that be try to squash by any means necessary. And Righteous Warrior is one of those things where it gives you different perspectives of what makes a righteous warrior. And after that, I have another one planned, called, I forgot the name of it, but it's about a young starlet who comes from nothing and finds out about fame and fortune and then crashes and burns. Because we've all, at least me personally, I've always wondered what would make somebody rise to that level of fame and stardom and then crash and burn. So I basically wrote a fiction story about my take on it, on how I would see it. And after that, I don't know how far into the future, but I have a series of books called The Shifting Sands that are based on my military service from my first deployment on to the end of the road, which is when I got out. And it goes into detail about stuff I alluded to here, but I didn't openly discuss. But it'll be, all of that will be in those books. Exactly as you read Fading Age, Dusk of Innocence, imagine that, but me telling.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Really awesome. So somewhere right now, somebody will be listening to this podcast, and it, hopefully there's going to be women, there's going to be men, but women. They've survived something, but they've never told anyone. What would be your message to them?
My
Because
question.
we already talked about this. We already talked about this earlier. Whereas there's so many there's so many women who keep it inside and don't come forward. What is your message to those people?
First, my question would be, is what's holding you back? If you're hurting, don't you want to feel better? The first step in acknowledging that there's a problem is to acknowledge that there's a problem. If something happened, regardless of what it is, I encourage them to find somebody they know and trust and tell them, open up, whether it be a preacher, a parent, a friend, heck, they can even reach out to me on social media. I'll listen.
Mhm.
And I mean that wholeheartedly because I've been there. And like I said, I don't want you guys to feel like I felt. And if there's anything that I can do, provide a listening ear, or maybe even direct you to resources, I'm more than willing and happy to do it for you because I don't want you guys to go through what I went through or feel like I felt.
For any veteran who, and you know, so we're post-war, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but there's still a lot of trauma hanging on to veterans. I think you know that,
Oh, yeah.
being in the veteran community. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to our brothers and sisters that are still in uniform or wore the uniform? Uh, what would you say to them that are still hanging on to this trauma?
I would tell them to not lose hope. Don't lose hope because there is somebody out there somewhere who's gonna care enough to help you the way you need it. I mean, I can speak for myself that even though it, it's a gray area, but I do have a support system. But situations for each person is different, and I don't know what's going on in each individual person's life. But I would definitely tell them to ask for help, not be afraid to ask for help, but to ask for help because if they don't, all that trauma is just going to build up, build up, build up, and it's going to eat you alive. And it's either going to push you to one of three things: the ground, the bottle, or drugs, which is what I
So,
have personally seen.
would you
Not worth.
people to pick up the Bible and start reading
Most,
Scripture?
most definitely. The Bible, even if you don't know where to start, just pick it up and open it. And you'd be surprised if you come to Jesus. What I did is I came to Jesus with an open heart and I said, Lord, guide me, show me what you want me to know. Lo and behold, that Bible turns to exactly the right scripture that I was needing at the time. Like when I was doubting that I don't know if if my life is meant for anything more. Like if I'm ever gonna do anything more than this with my life. And one of the times I was reading the Bible, Acts 26:17, I believe it is. For I will bring you out from your own people so you can show them. Actually, you know what? Let me look it up right quick. Because it's gonna eat me alive if it says, and the Lord said, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting, but rise and stand upon your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you as a servant, and as a witness to the things which you have seen me, and to those in which I will appear to you, delivering you from your people and from the Gentiles to whom I am sending you, to open their eyes, so that they may turn from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified in faith by me. And this comes from Bible Gateway. So to me, that stood out because even though my path isn't clear, when I said, like, I feel like after I rolled over 3 days after I was born, that was why. Because I've always felt this calling in my heart to share my message, to share my testimony, and all I can do is share it. Everyone, and it's up to each individual person whether or not they want to take me up on that. But if there's anything I can encourage people to help them in their healing journey is to get to know Jesus. If you don't know Jesus, your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, look at where I am now. Listen. I encourage you, as a matter of fact, to go back and listen to this podcast again. Listen to everything that I went through and listen to my voice now. And mark
Mhm.
my words, Jesus will help you because I've seen him help me. And Jesus doesn't turn away his children. If there's
So,
anything that that they can take from listening to this podcast, is that don't look at me and what I've been through. I hope that you can see him through what I've been through because he's the reason I'm here right now sharing my testimony with you. And I also want to tell
So
them what. Go ahead.
what does Hebrews 11:1 say to you?
Hebrews
What does it
11.
say to others?
It says, having faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you do not see. That means
Don't lose heart.
exactly being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you do not see. If you know in your heart that you're going to make it, trust that God is going to get you there. Jesus.
Mhm. Uh, I have a question for you, and I get this asked every once in a while,
Yeah.
and what do you wish someone had told you when you were 20 years old?
When I was 20 years old, I wish somebody had been honest and brutally honest with me and told me, buckle up, sweetheart, put your big girl pants on and hold on, because it's not going to be easy what you got coming, but here's a Bible. This will be your guide. You got this.
Yeah, and I can't thank you enough. Yeah, through my experiences in life, my career fields, I know what I've heard these stories, right? So it takes a lot of courage for somebody like you to take their time and come on a show and share these stories, right? It's not easy.
Mm-mm.
It's not easy. And is there any final message that you would want to share?
My
And
final
I'll
me-
give it. I want to give you the time to before we depart. I want to give you the floor, and
Thank
and
you.
and, and if there's anything spiritual or any other message that can be given, what would you say to others?
I would tell them that we live in crazy times. You know, politics this, politics that. A lot of us are confused. We're going through stuff. The economy's not doing the greatest right now. I would tell them, especially if all this is affecting their mental health and they don't know where to go or where to turn or they feel like giving up, I would ask them to consider that whenever the world gives you a million reasons to want to give up and quit, to turn to Jesus Christ and ask Him to help you find the one reason you need to keep going. And again, if you don't believe me, I encourage you to listen to this podcast again. 20 years ago, I was homeless. 20 years later, I own my own home. That seems like trying to get to the moon for somebody who came from nothing, who was on the street, who's been a victim, who's been a survivor. It's like God helped me, and I know He's going to help you too. And my my biggest prayer, I guess, would be please don't look for permanent solutions to temporary problems. Because
Mm,
I know when I was in those stages of my life, there were moments when I didn't think life was worth living, to be honest and blank and upfront. But you know what? I took that same feeling of uncertainty and I put it in God's hands. When I was going through my thing post army, because I don't think we really touched much on that, I lost my army career, I lost my grandma, and I lost my baby girl in the 12th week of pregnancy, back to back to back in less than a year. When I say I was at the end of my rope, I was at the end of my rope. And that's when the real test came. And I had to ask myself, do I want to be the victim and let all this define me? Or do I want to be the victor, put my faith in God, and trust that all these things I've been through are going to be used to help others who are in the same boat? Because I knew that if I closed the curtain for the final call, then people weren't going to get to hear my message, especially those who needed it most. So if you find yourself in that situation, please don't close the curtain. Use everything you've been through to share your story and your testimony. You never know who that's going to reach, who it's going to touch, who's going to need that exact your message at that exact time. Because when I tell you God works in mysterious ways, you better believe it.
It's a true story right there.
Amen.
And if one thing listeners can take from this conversation today, what would it be?
Don't look at me and what I've been through. Look at how Jesus has helped me get to this point. Listen to this podcast and see how he's the one that shines through in all of it. I'm not taking the credit for any of this. The only thing I'm doing is alive and breathing. Everything else is on God. Because trust me, if he didn't want me here, there were many times he could have called me home, but I'm still here. And I want that to be to help you guys out there who are going through what I did.
So what does Philippians 4:13 have any meaning to that last message?
Philippians 4:13.
I just thought I'd throw it out there to you.
That's exactly, if we could summarize my testimony, that would be it in one sentence. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. That's the reason I'm here right now. Because if God hadn't given me the strength,
So, Maria, I can't thank you enough for doing this. You're a courageous woman. You've been through a lot, and things are better than they were 20 years ago.
Oh God, yes.
And yeah, and you have a good support system, and you're doing good, and you're here to help other people, right?
That's my goal. I would want nothing.
And for the viewers that are watching, Maria's on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, and I can attest to this. She's a very approachable person. We've talked prior to this podcast. You can find her on Facebook at Maria Teresa, and her and correct me if I'm wrong on this. Your TikTok handle is Maria.Teresa38165. And then on Instagram, you can find her at Maria Teresa Author 2026. So, Maria, thank you so much for coming on the Blue Line Voice, Blood, Sand, and Smoke. It was such a pleasure to have you. I can't give you more than enough credit for taking this time to share these events. And most of all, I hope people listen, and I hope that it helps people. And I will have resources in the comments based on the topics that we talked about. So, because we don't want to leave people without resources, right? There's always something out there.
And to all the listeners out there, I promise, if you write to me, I'll write back, and I'll be as real as it gets. There's not gonna be no hidden agenda. It's just me trying to help you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you. Have a blessed day.